I've shared about the 2011 pilgrimage to Israel and how I feel like the most significant aspect of my spiritual journey revolved around the completion as a group and as a lineage, really, of an opening of an incursion point between heaven and earth, the first that I'm aware of, at the place that Jeshua established communion with humanity at the Last Supper, first act of communion, from which all future acts of communion have come. That place acts as his communication center from which everything emanates out. And so to have the pebble of the joining of heaven and earth open there, the door open as it were, that means that whatever enters there comes out across his communication network, affecting the whole world. And that opening occurred in October of 2011. Though I knew this deep in my soul, I always felt that there should be some other confirmation about other events happening at the same time, because it wouldn't be just one place that this is happening, I wouldn't think. Though that might be a central place, I know that there's much more going on than I'm aware of, and usually we're part of a much larger process. Nevertheless, there had never been any confirmation about anything else happening in 2011, October of 2011. And there also had been never, even the 4.5 years since this had occurred, Joshua refused to speak to me about it, except to say, "Beloved friend, celebrate for 20 years what has happened, and you might begin to understand the scale of what has happened, what has occurred." Besides that, no reference whatsoever to the event. And so time goes by, and in the spring of 2016, it's announced that there's going to be a pilgrimage to Santa Fe, that JM is going to run one. And I've been on many of the trips, but I haven't been on all of them. There have been various trips I haven't gone to. And so it's never a given that I'm going someplace. I really, money was a big issue. These are thousands of dollars, and I didn't have it. I didn't have the money. And so I'm not really thinking about this pilgrimage in April of 2016 to Santa Fe. Now, I've also shared that in 2011 there was a spiritual soul partner, not a physical personal relationship, but an energetic spiritual relationship partnership that I had with a woman who was in Israel, who I've referred to as Morning Star. My experience of her presence was that it was the type of thing that I'd only be in her presence when something truly huge was taking place in the lineage plan. It didn't work any other way except for in huge work. And so whenever she was on the scene, which was very rare, it was very rare that we'd be someplace together, I always felt something major was happening. She and I hadn't been in touch for years when 2016 rolled around, and there was a pilgrimage coming up to Santa Fe, but then JM was also going to Spain in June. So April in Santa Fe and June Spain. So one morning I wake up and I feel her presence very clearly. It's like she's with me, present with me, and I thought that was very unusual. Like, that very rarely happens. Then Joshua appeared to me, and this has never happened in this way. He didn't appear to me, but he brought me a vision. The only time I've ever had a vision like this. But the vision was very clear. I was just waking up in the morning. There's several mornings in a row where I was waking up, and at that time, first I felt Morning Star's presence one day. Then I believe it was the next day or shortly thereafter that a vision came to me from Joshua. The vision was of a planet, Earth, in space, and I knew it was 2011, and the leading edge of the Earth was leading. There was like an opening on one edge of the Earth, which was Jerusalem, and it was pointing towards a certain aspect of galactic space. And from that aspect of galactic space, there was this huge light coming in, and that represented the portal opening in 2011. Now, the Earth then turns in space and gets bigger as it comes towards me. And I realize it's now the present day, or close to the present day. It's near the present day. Much, moves forward in time in its rotation. And now there's an edge leaning towards a much larger area of galactic space, much more energetic presence of galactic space. And the leaning edge is New Mexico, Santa Fe, Abiquiu, where the land is, and Santa Fe, where the Way of Mastery is channeled. And Joshua simply says to me, there will be a massive opening in Santa Fe. And for me, Santa Fe at the time, and I'm an East Coaster. Santa Fe means New Mexico, Abiquiu, the Sacred Land, the whole thing. So I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. And I knew it was a direct reference on his part to the work that had happened in Jerusalem in 2011. And now this was the next step. And he referred to it as a massive opening. So the first step had significant influence on the world, I felt. That's the way I saw it. Well, this one was going to be different, much bigger. So that was such a strong realization. And then the next day, Morningstar, the woman I'm speaking of, calls me, which is completely, I think it's unprecedented. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? So she calls me and says, Dave, are you feeling called to go on pilgrimage? And I go, well, no, I'm not. And she goes, well, and we had a conversation about it, and she shared several reasons as to why she was feeling called to go on pilgrimage. And I said, oh, this is how dense I am. I go, oh, there's about 2 weeks until the Santa Fe pilgrimage, where Joshua had just told me there'd be a major opening. And so I go, oh, are you going to Spain in June? I'd blocked Santa Fe completely out of my mind. She goes, no, to Santa Fe. And I go, oh my God, yes. So he's talking about now. There's going to be so I shared the vision. I think I did, at least. And I knew, I had a revelation. I knew that day, someone, I didn't know who it was going to be. It was going to be someone who was going to call me and volunteer to pay for my trip. And sure enough, that happened. So thank you to my dear friend who did that and made my going possible. So Santa Fe in 2016 is a profoundly major time. Before we get there, however, JM gives a one-day workshop at Eden Manor, the last one. Eden Manor is closing, and we're doing kind of a final one-day event on Easter Sunday at Eden Manor. It's a beautiful event. This is just before the trip to Santa Fe. And at that gathering, I start talking with someone who does a lot of spiritual work, and she starts talking about her own path, her journey, and she said, well, there was a time when something so major happened that my entire world was changed. And she talked about it like I felt how the portal opening in 2011 affected my life. It's like I didn't even know why I was still on the planet Earth still. And she said, yeah, that happened to me too. And I said, I hadn't told her the specifics of the dates or anything. And I said, well, when did that happen? And she said, oh, it happened in October of 2011. And I'm going, what happened? She said, well, we opened a huge Stargate portal, I forget exactly how she put it, in the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. Well, that makes sense to me that type of same thing would be happening, and it was a couple weeks after what had happened in Israel, and that made perfect sense to me. And then within a day, we had 2 more confirmations that there had been on the Sacred Land in Santa Fe an opening that was a gathering of the Shanti Cristo, and they're the people who own the land currently. And also that another woman who was in the spiritual circles had done a similar thing in October 2011. So all these confirmations right before the trip to Santa Fe in 2016, that indeed in October 2011 there had been all of these major openings occurring. So that was a confirmation. So I've shared in the previous video how this story of the steps of the Basilica in Santa Fe, and how I felt the whole time we were there, we were really under the umbrella of Mass, in a sense. Sacred gathering from beginning to end, connecting with beings we were connecting with been there a long time waiting for us, in a sense. But I want to jump forward to, there are 2 days that need to be discussed, and the first day I'll discuss just briefly, and then the second we'll spend the next video on. So the first day we go to the land. Now, in the Way of Mastery, this is a Way of Mastery gathering. In the Way of Mastery, there's been a split, as there are in many of these spiritual paths. And one group the Shanti Cristo Foundation went one way and published a lot of this channeled material. And JM, who's the channel, went another way and felt that what they were doing really wasn't in alignment. And so there's been this kind of thing going on. And, it's unfortunate, I guess, but maybe it all is working for the best. I mean, I'm sure it is working for the best. It's more like people are going their own ways to accomplish something so that when they come back together, there'll be a greater thing, I believe. But there's been this split, and so for the first time, we're gathering on the land with one of the members of the Shiny Cristo board. So this gathering is a beautiful gathering, and there's a beautiful heart connection with him and with the people there. Now, JM has talked about the Temple Canyon land as a place where he's had various encounters. When he first goes there, he's met by the spirits of the Native Americans who are guardians of the land, a bunch of other things like this. And there's more to that than just that. So I'm watching, as I'm standing from a bit of a distance, as JM and the representative from the Shiny Cristo board, a man named Chuck Tout, hug in the middle of this group, and everybody's kind of, I don't know, there's a big group hug or something, these spiritual circles, And as this is happening, I'm praying, because I think it's a sacred event, this rejoining of these servants of the Way of Mastery. And my hands are like this. And somebody comes up and puts their hands on my back, which I thought was unusual given the intimacy of the moment, yeah? And so I thought, well, how am I going to deal with this? I don't want to kind of tell anybody off, but at the same time, I don't want to kind of engage and pull away from what's happening, so I just kind of ignored it, and wasn't going to turn around to see who was there, because I felt one hand on my back very clearly, and then another, like somebody was just putting their hands, their weight on my back. So my little voice says, no, turn around. See who it is. So I turn around, and there's no one there. And I tried recreating by moving my shoulders and my jacket to see if I get anything similar to the same feeling, but no. There was clearly weight and something was on my shoulders while this hug was occurring. So I thought that was very beautiful that at that moment, that these two groups that had such a strong connection and service to the pathway and to the land, as they were beginning a rejoining, which I think is still occurring, that the spirits of the land were had their hands on my back. It was a beautiful, special moment for me. I don't have a lot of experiences like this. That's the first time I'd ever had an experience like that. And then from there on, there's a beautiful unfoldment. We don't spend a whole lot of time on the land that day. But the next day, I wake up, and a day begins, which is quite an extraordinary day, and I call it a day of peace. And I'll tell the whole thing in the next video. But just to start, I knew that I was supposed to go to the land with Chuck the next day. We had met at a place called, we had a little time to chat after the gathering on the land at a place called Ojo Caliente, which is a mineral spring where we all go and hanging out. I had reached out to Shiny Cristo as someone who's hung out with JM a lot, but really mostly as a student of the path. And was just wondering why they weren't publishing and supporting all of the things that JM had come through, Jeshua had brought and created with JM after the formal channelings. And they weren't recognizing it or practicing it. And I'm like, well, you can't practice part of a pathway and expect to treat it like it's the whole. And so I thought I was being polite and just asking questions. And the people at Shiny Cristo got so defensive that they started, and this is just a miscommunication. I'm not saying I'm right or they're wrong or anything. I just think there was people talk about Mercury retrograde. Anytime you try to communicate something, it's totally misunderstood. Well, that's the way I felt. And Chuck had saw it from the other side, that I was this guy causing trouble or whatever. So I went to get in one of the hot tubs. See, maybe 15 people in these hot tubs at Ojo Caliente. And he looks up at me like the devil's getting in the water. And I thought, this is pretty funny. And Chuck's a really nice down-home guy and, sports fan. There aren't that many sports fans in the spiritual world. I'm one. So I thought we'd naturally get along well. And so I knew I wanted to spend more time with Chuck the next day to get to know him better. And so as breakfast comes the next day, I'm wondering how this might happen. And a few things go on, and then if someone comes over to me and says, hey, Dave, Chuck is taking a bunch of people out to the land. Would you like to go? And I go, here we go. It's all being orchestrated. So that would begin the second day on the land in 2016 at a gathering in which Jeshua said there will be a huge opening occurring. Part 2's next. Thanks for listening.